Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Midnight Alarm. The grand clock in the hall of Harrowfield Manor had only just struck 1 when a shrill cry pierced the stillness of the night. Guests, startled from their sleep, sat bolt upright in their beds, some fumbling for dressing gowns, others hesitating in confusion. The corridors quickly filled with the hurried scuffle of slippers against polished oak, the rustle of silken robes, and the murmur of anxious voices. The cry had come from the eastern wing, from Lady Winthrop's boudoir. She stood there now, pale and trembling, her hands pressed against her cheeks in a gesture of despair. At her side loomed the heavy figure of her husband, Sir Julian, his face flushed with anger, his dressing gown flapping about him as though he were ready for battle. "My necklace!" Lady Winthrop wailed. "The emeralds, they are gone. All of them, gone." The little wall safe stood open behind her. Its door hung wide, its velvet-lined interior empty, mocking her distress. A valuable heirloom of the Harrowfield family, the Winthrop emeralds had been entrusted to that safe only hours earlier. They were stones of remarkable size and beauty, a necklace said to be worth a king's ransom, passed down through generations. Now they had vanished as though spirited away by unseen hands. Servants crowded the doorway, some whispering, others craning their necks for a glimpse of the scene within. From among the group of weekend guests came murmurs of disbelief. "Impossible," exclaimed Major Blaketon, a broad-shouldered man with bristling grey moustaches. "No thief could have entered undetected." "Yet one has," said Miss Alice Harrowfield in her clear, cutting voice. The young lady, cousin to Lady Winthrop, folded her arms with an air of grim satisfaction. Her eyes, sharp and gleaming, seemed almost to welcome the drama. Lady Winthrop swayed, and for a moment it appeared she might faint. A chair was brought hastily, and she sank into it with a shuddering breath. "Julian, you must send for the police at once," she whispered. Sir Julian's heavy brows drew together. "By heaven, I shall. But mark my words, Margaret, this house will not rest until the thief is exposed. Every servant, every guest, all shall be questioned." It was at this moment that a quiet, composed voice cut through the rising tumult. "If I may, Sir Julian," said Hercule Poirot. Until now, he had stood somewhat apart from the commotion, his small frame upright, his eyes bright and observant. He was a curious sight in his silk pajamas and perfectly tied dressing gown, his patent leather slippers gleaming in the light of the lamps. His moustaches, though not freshly waxed, retained their precise upward curve, for Hercule Poirot never allowed himself to appear dishevelled, even in the dead of night. "By all means, Monsieur Poirot," Sir Julian replied with a mixture of impatience and relief. "You have dealt with such matters before, I believe. Pray, lend us your assistance." Poirot inclined his head gravely. "It will be my pleasure, though I fear, Miss Amiss, that our night's repose is already spoiled." His dark eyes rested upon the open safe. "Permit me to see the place of the crime before too many feet disturb the little signs that may remain." At his words, several of the guests retreated, while the servants shuffled back uneasily. Poirot stepped forward, his gaze moving from the safe to the French windows on the far side of the room, which stood slightly ajar, admitting the cool night air. The curtain stirred faintly in the draught. "Ah," he murmured. "The intruder, perhaps? Or merely a stage set, contrived to mislead." Lady Winthrop clutched at his sleeve. "Monsieur Poirot, it was locked, the safe, I mean. I saw Graves, our butler, close it with my own eyes before dinner." "How can this be?" "Locked, yes. But locked how?" Poirot's voice was gentle but probing. "Was it with a key, or a code of numbers?" A code, Lady Winthrop replied faintly. Only Julian and I know it. Poirot's eyes flickered toward Sir Julian, who bristled at the implied suspicion. Do not look at me so, sir. I was in my room all the while. If you mean to say... Poirot raised a hand. I mean nothing, Sir Julian, save that the facts are curious. A safe, untouched by force, opened in the middle of the night. Windows open, as if to invite us to believe in a burglar who has crept in from the garden. Too simple, perhaps, too simple by half. He knelt with surprising grace for a man of his compact build, inspecting the carpet about the safe. No dust displaced, no scratches. The hand that did this was familiar, confident. He rose, brushing his hands. Yes, it is curious indeed. From behind, a nervous voice piped up. Do you think it could have been one of us? It was Mrs. Selby, a plump widow with an excess of jewellery upon her person, who clutched her shawl as though fearful the thief might next strip it from her shoulders. Poirot turned to her with a mild smile. Madam, in such a house, it is necessary to consider every possibility. But let us not leap too quickly to conclusions. The night is young, and the truth, how do you say, the truth, it will wait for us patiently. The police were summoned, but Poirot was already at work in his quiet, methodical way. He inspected the windows, noting the absence of footprints on the terrace beyond. He studied the lock of the safe, his fingertips resting upon it delicately, as though feeling for secrets it might yet yield. All the while his mind ticked silently, like a fine Swiss watch. At length he drew back, his gaze moving slowly from guest to guest. Some avoided his eyes, others stared too boldly. Poirot, who understood human nature as well as he did any mechanism, saw more in those fleeting expressions than the household realized. Courage, Lady Winthrop, he said at last, bowing slightly before her chair. Your emeralds, they are not lost forever. I promise you this, Hercule Poirot will not rest until the matter is brought to order. For, as you English say, this is not cricket. The declaration brought a murmur of approval from some, a scowl from Sir Julian, and a faint smile of gratitude from Lady Winthrop herself. The household, reassured yet uneasy, began to disperse. Only Poirot lingered by the open safe, his eyes thoughtful, his moustaches quivering ever so slightly as though in private amusement. Too simple, he repeated softly to himself. Yes, indeed, far, far too simple. Chapter 2, The Scene of the Crime. Harrowfield Manor, though steeped in history and grandeur, had seldom known such disorder. The next morning, the usual tranquility of its manicured lawns and gleaming corridors was replaced by whispers, anxious footsteps, and an air of unease that no amount of polished silver or starched linen could dispel. The household, once so confident in its security, now quivered under the shadow of suspicion. Yet Hercule Poirot, for his part, seemed entirely undisturbed. He breakfasted neatly, as though nothing had occurred, trimming his toast into precise rectangles before buttering them with careful economy of movement. His little grey eyes roved over the assembled company, noting who ate with appetite and who merely pushed their food about the plate. He observed, too, the strained smiles, the forced laughter, and the silences that spoke louder than words. At length, he dabbed his moustaches with a napkin and rose. Miss Amos, he said with a little bow, it is time. Lady Winthrop, you will permit me, I hope, to make the most careful inspection of your boudoir. Lady Winthrop, still pale from the shock of the night before, inclined her head. Whatever you require, Monsieur Poirot. Only, pray, do not be long. I cannot bear to remain in that room. Courage, madam. I shall be brief, but thorough. And with that, Poirot, accompanied by Inspector Graves of the local constabulary and a reluctant Sir Julian, ascended once more to the eastern wing. Hastings, summoned hastily by telegram and arriving just in time for the morning's proceedings, fell into step beside his old friend. Dash it all, Poirot, Hastings murmured. It seems rather too neat, don't you think? An open window, a ransacked safe, it all points to a burglar from outside. Poirot's lips twitched. Precisely, mon ami. It points. But do we follow where it points, like obedient little sheep? Or do we ask ourselves, who has placed the finger there, and why? Inside the boudoir, the scene was much as it had been in the early hours. The safe gaped open, its velvet lining bare. The French windows admitted a pale morning light, and the faint fragrance of roses drifted in from the garden beyond. Poirot paused, breathing deeply, his nose twitching like that of a connoisseur detecting subtle notes in a rare perfume. Observe, Hastings, how fresh is the air in this room. It is not the staleness of a chamber left closed through the night. Someone has stood here long enough to admit a draught. But look also at the curtains, they are scarcely disturbed. Would a thief, creeping in from the garden, not brush them aside with haste? Inspector Graves, a solid man of practical bent, grunted. We found footprints on the lawn below the terrace, Monsieur Poirot. Plain as anything. A man's shoe, size 9, leading away towards the river. Poirot smiled indulgently. Ah, footprints. Always the delight of the policeman. Yet consider, are they not too plain, too perfect? When one flees in fear of discovery, one does not step so neatly, so evenly. No, no, Inspector, these are the marks of a man who wished to be seen, who laid down his steps with care. They tell us nothing, save of a clumsy attempt at deception. Hastings frowned. But why would anyone go to such lengths? Surely it would be easier to break the lock and be done with it. Ah! Poirot raised a finger. But to break a lock would suggest an intruder. To open it smoothly, as though with knowledge of its secret, that suggests someone within the household. The false trail of the footprints, the open window, they are but a mask, my friend, to make us believe in the burglar of romance. Poirot advanced upon the safe itself, kneeling before it with the reverence of a priest before an altar. His fingertips traced the metal, his eyes half closed as though listening for whispers. No scratches. The dial is unmarked. And yet it has been opened. Lady Winthrop tells us only two knew the code, herself and her husband. But codes, Hastings, are like the words in a child's diary, one may always discover them if one has patience, or a little help from chance. Sir Julian bristled. You cannot mean to imply, sir, that my wife or I... Poirot raised a calming hand. I imply nothing, Sir Julian. I merely note the facts. It is my duty to consider all possibilities, however distasteful. If one closes one's eyes to unpleasant thoughts, one does not reach the truth, n'est-ce pas? Turning abruptly, Poirot crossed to the dressing table. A single drawer was slightly ajar, though its contents appeared undisturbed. He examined it minutely, then nodded to himself. So, the thief is no clumsy brute. He searches with delicacy, with precision. He knows where to look, and what he desires. He has no interest in pearls, in trinkets, only the emeralds. This was not theft of opportunity, but of design. Inspector Graves shifted uncomfortably. Well, if you say so, sir. But to my mind it looks like the work of some fellow who knew the place well enough. Perhaps one of the staff. Perhaps, Poirot agreed mildly. Yet his eye strayed towards the French windows again, and his moustaches quivered as though they scented amusement. He moved outside, stepping carefully onto the stone terrace. Hastings followed. The morning dew still clung to the grass, but the footprints, clear as photographs, led away in a tidy line. Poirot crouched, studying them intently. See, Hastings, each print is complete, as though made with care. Yet note the depth, shallow, too shallow for a man who leaps from a window carrying jewels of such weight. And the stride, ah! A child could not have arranged them more evenly. No, no, mon ami. These are prints pressed into the ground by one who wished to deceive. The thief is clever, but not clever enough. He rose, brushing his knees, and regarded the river in the distance. It is there, perhaps, we shall find our next clue. A man may attempt to throw suspicion into the waters, but the waters, they are excellent at returning secrets. As they re-entered the boudoir, Poirot paused once more before the safe. "Tell me, Hastings," he asked softly, "what is missing here?" Hastings looked baffled. "Why, the necklace, of course." Poirot shook his head gently. "No, no. Something smaller, less valuable, but of equal importance. Consider, the thief, he takes the jewels, yes. But he leaves behind disorder, clues to mislead. And yet he overlooks something. I do not yet see it, but I feel it. It will come." Lady Winthrop appeared in the doorway just then, pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "have you discovered anything?" Poirot bowed. "Not yet, madam. But I have discovered this: the theft was no act of random fortune. It was planned, with knowledge and intention. Therefore, the circle of suspects is not wide, but narrow. Be patient, and trust the little grey cells. They do not fail." Her eyes filled with tears, but she managed a faint smile. Poirot watched her go, then turned to Hastings. His voice, though calm, held a note of steel. "The game, mon ami, is afoot. Already, the mask begins to slip. Let us see who lies beneath." Chapter 3: The Guests Assembled. The drawing-room of Harrowfield Manor had, until the previous evening, been a place of elegance and comfort, where fires burned cheerfully in the hearth and conversations meandered lazily over sherry. That morning, however, it became the setting for something altogether different, a tribunal of sorts, where every glance was measured, every word weighed, and suspicion hung as thick as the smoke from Sir Julian's cigar. Poirot stood by the mantelpiece, his hands clasped neatly before him, his bright eyes surveying the company. Hastings, notebook in hand, sat nearby with the air of a loyal soldier awaiting orders. Inspector Graves occupied a chair at the far end, heavy-jawed and stolid, prepared to listen but plainly sceptical of anything that smacked of fancy reasoning. One by one, the guests and household members presented themselves. Poirot, with his customary courtesy, encouraged them to speak freely, though he missed not the smallest tremor of a hand, nor the quickest flicker of an eyelid. Lady Winthrop. Lady Winthrop was the first to be questioned. Still pale, she sat with her fingers entwined tightly about a lace handkerchief. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "The necklace was safe when I left the room after dressing for dinner," she said. "I entrusted Graves to close the safe. He spun the dial in my presence. After that, I saw nothing more until the dreadful discovery at 1 o'clock." Poirot inclined his head. "And the code, madam, you alone know it, apart from Sir Julian." "Yes," she whispered. "It has been unchanged for years." Poirot regarded her gently, though his eyes glimmered with thought. "Forgive me, Lady Winthrop, but are you certain no one has ever observed you in the act of opening the safe? Curiosity, it is a very natural thing." Well, I suppose, no, I do not believe so." She faltered. "Very good, madam. Courage. We shall return to you later. Sir Julian Winthrop." Her husband strode forward next, his manner brusque, his expression that of a man affronted by the very suggestion of impropriety. "I will tell you this much, Poirot," he declared, his voice booming. "Neither my wife nor I would stoop to such theatrics. The necklace is the pride of our family. Whoever dared touch it shall pay dearly, of that I assure you." Poirot inclined his head once more. "And you, Sir Julian, where were you between the hours of midnight and 1? In my room, of course. I had retired early, having letters to dictate. Dictate to whom? Poirot asked mildly. Sir Julian coloured slightly. To myself. I spoke them into my phonograph, as is my habit. You may verify it if you please. Poirot smiled faintly. I may indeed. Miss Alice Harrowfield. Next came Miss Alice Harrowfield, cousin to Lady Winthrop. She was a woman of perhaps 30, thin and sharp-featured, with an expression that suggested she found amusement in watching others flounder. I can assure you, Monsieur Poirot, she said with a laugh that held little warmth, I have no interest in baubles, however splendid. Emeralds do not pay rent, and that, alas, is of more concern to me these days. Poirot studied her keenly. And where were you, mademoiselle, at the hour of the alarm? In my room, reading. I keep late hours, you know. The cry roused me at once. I joined the others. Reading what, if I may ask? A novel, she replied airily. One of your English thrillers. Far more entertaining than this business, though I admit the similarities are striking. Poirot's moustaches quivered. Life, mademoiselle, has the unfortunate habit of imitating art, though never so neatly as art imitates life. Her eyes narrowed at his words, and she gave a little shrug. Major Blaketon. Major Blaketon came forward next, his military bearing intact though his hand, as Poirot observed, trembled slightly when he set down his teacup. A dashed bad business, this, he declared. Never seen anything like it. Shocking. Perfectly shocking. Poirot inclined his head. Your room, Major, it is situated near the eastern wing. Yes, directly opposite Lady Winthrop's boudoir. I heard nothing until the commotion began. Must confess, I sleep soundly. Poirot's eyes flicked to the Major's cufflinks, hastily fastened and mismatched, and to the beads of perspiration upon his brow. And you have not mislaid anything of late, Major? A glove, perhaps, or a handkerchief? Blaketon flushed scarlet. Certainly not, he barked, and with that sat down heavily, refusing further questions. Mrs. Selby. Then came Mrs. Selby, a widow of ample means and ample frame, whose perfume preceded her like a herald. She fluttered into her chair with the air of one who suffers nobly for the benefit of society. My dear Monsieur Poirot, she cooed, I simply cannot endure the idea of being in a house where such dreadful goings-on occur. Quite distressing. Why, I hardly slept a wink. Poirot bowed politely. And yet, madam, you appear admirably composed this morning. Your sleep, it cannot have been so very disturbed. A flicker of irritation crossed her face. I manage, monsieur. As to the necklace, I know nothing. I retired early and was quite alone. Alone, Poirot repeated softly. Yes, indeed. Mr. Harold Kent. Last of all was Mr. Harold Kent, the Winthrops' financial adviser. He was a thin man in spectacles, with an anxious air and a habit of smoothing his hair whenever addressed. A terrible loss, this necklace, he murmured. Quite irreplaceable. I only hope the insurance company. Sir Julian silenced him with a glare. Poirot leaned forward. Monsieur Kent, you manage the family's accounts, I believe. Yes, yes, of course. And you are familiar, perhaps, with the value of the emeralds? Why, naturally. One cannot advise without such knowledge. Poirot smiled. Then you will understand better than anyone else the precise magnitude of what has been taken. A man may be tempted by such knowledge, do you not think? Kent flushed, stammered, and muttered something inaudible before retreating to his chair. Poirot reflects. When all had spoken, Poirot allowed silence to settle over the room. He moved to the window, gazing out at the morning sun glinting on the river. Hastings waited, pen poised, eager for a pronouncement. "Well, Poirot," he asked at last. Poirot turned, his eyes bright. "You see, Hastings, what a curious little gathering we have here. Each guest, each servant, each with his or her secrets. To the casual glance, they are innocent of all. But to Poirot, they are transparent as glass." Hastings blinked. "You don't mean you can already see the thief?" Poirot raised a hand, wagging a finger. "Not yet, mon ami. Not yet. But I begin to see the shapes of motive, the patterns of opportunity. One trembles when he should not tremble, one laughs when laughter is out of place, another speaks too much, another too little. These are not proofs, no. But they are threads, Hastings, threads, which, if followed carefully, will weave for us a most revealing tapestry." He adjusted his cuffs, his expression serene. "For now, let them rest. But soon, very soon, we shall tug at these threads, and then, mon cher, we shall see who unravels." Chapter 4, Clues and Contradictions. The following day dawned bright and clear, but the sunshine did little to dispel the uneasy air that now hung over Harrowfield Manor. The servants moved about with strained faces, whispering in corners, the guests spoke in voices too loud, as though to conceal their unease. It was as if the theft had unsettled the very bricks of the house. Poirot, however, appeared in excellent spirits. His moustaches were trimmed to perfection, his patent shoes gleamed, and his step across the gravel paths of the garden was brisk. Hastings, following at his side, marvelled not for the first time at his friend's ability to remain so composed in the midst of turmoil. "Dash it all, Poirot," Hastings said, "the whole business looks straightforward enough to me." An intruder came through the window, seized the jewels, and bolted for the river. "You saw the footprints yourself?" Poirot's lips curled. "Ah, mon cher Hastings, you are like a fine English hound, you see the trail, you follow it faithfully, without asking whether the trail has been laid for your benefit." "No, no. I tell you again, the footprints, they are too perfect, too obliging. They tell us not who came, but who wishes us to believe he came. The false trail." Together they followed the line of prints towards the river. At the edge of the lawn the marks grew fainter, finally disappearing on the bank. Poirot crouched, his eye scanning the ground minutely. "There, you see? No impression of descent into the water. The thief would have us think he vanished like a ghost upon the stream. But there is no splash, no dragging of mud. Instead, regard this, Hastings." He pointed to a broken twig a little way inland, and a patch of flattened grass. "Our thief has been careless. He staged his flight to the river, but in truth he turned back towards the house. The false trail is itself the greatest clue." Hastings shook his head. "Then it must be someone inside." "Just so," Poirot said softly. "The handkerchief." Later that morning, a gardener brought Poirot a discovery, a white handkerchief embroidered with the letter A, found among the rose bushes near the terrace. "Aha!" Hastings exclaimed. "Alice Harrowfield, without a doubt. She must have dropped it as she slipped out in the night." Poirot examined the handkerchief delicately, as though it were a relic in a museum. He held it up to the light, sniffed it, and smiled faintly. "It is curious. Freshly laundered, yet with no scent of perfume. And look, Hastings, there is no trace of soil upon it, no sign it has lain long in the earth. It is as though it were placed here deliberately, very recently." "You mean?" "Yes. It is another trick, another pointing finger. But who places it? That is the question." When questioned, Miss Alice Harrowfield laughed scornfully. "That? Why, I mislaid it weeks ago. I have a dozen exactly alike. If someone wishes to incriminate me, they will have to try harder than that." Her tone was sharp, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Poirot noted it, saying nothing. The butler speaks. That afternoon, Poirot sought out Graves, the Winthrops' butler. Tall, thin, and as rigid as an oak beam, Graves carried himself with the dignity of one who considered service a vocation. "You closed the safe, I think, on the evening of the dinner?" Poirot asked. "Yes, sir. At Lady Winthrop's instruction. She replaced the necklace, and I spun the dial as usual." "Did anyone observe you?" "Not to my knowledge, sir." Poirot tilted his head. "And forgive me, Graves, but do you ever keep record of the family's insurance arrangements? I hear Sir Julian was lately in correspondence on that subject." A slight tightening of the butler's lips betrayed discomfort. "I post the letters, sir. As to their contents, I cannot say." Poirot let him go with a polite bow. But as Graves withdrew, he whispered to Hastings, a quarrel with the insurers, just days before the theft. "Is it not interesting? If the jewels are lost, the money comes in. And yet, would Sir Julian truly risk so much for a scheme so transparent? The web of motives." By evening Poirot had uncovered still more contradictions. Major Blaketon, blustering loudly of honour and outrage, had quietly asked a footman for the name of a moneylender in town. Mrs. Selby, despite her air of wealth, had written urgently to her bank, requesting an advance. And Mr. Harold Kent, the financial adviser, had been discovered in the library burning papers, old statements, he insisted, though he stammered as he said it. Each one, Poirot remarked to Hastings, is entangled by money. Debt, loss, desperation. The emeralds are not merely jewels, they are salvation. For some, they represent freedom. For others, concealment. For one, perhaps, the avoidance of ruin. Hastings frowned. But they can't all be guilty. No, Poirot agreed serenely. But all may have a reason to wish suspicion fall upon another. Thus, we find ourselves among contradictions, each clue points in two directions at once. The contradictory stories. At supper that night, Poirot turned the conversation casually to the hours before the alarm. He listened as each guest described their movements. "I retired at 10, Mrs. Selby insisted. "I require my beauty sleep." Yet her maid revealed she had been seen pacing until nearly midnight. Major Blaketon swore he had slept like a log, but Poirot noted the ink stains on his fingers, fresh, as though he had been writing letters in the small hours. Miss Alice maintained she had been reading, but when asked to produce her book, she hesitated, then claimed she had lent it to a servant. No such servant admitted receiving it. Mr. Kent muttered that he had been working on accounts, but none of his papers bore dates from that night. Everywhere, little cracks appeared. Poirot smiled to himself. "You see, Hastings? Each alibi is like a fine porcelain vase, glossy at first glance, but tap it lightly, and it rings false." Poirot's quiet resolution. As the evening drew to a close, Poirot stood once more before the open safe in Lady Winthrop's boudoir. The emptiness within seemed to echo the unease that now filled the manor. He touched the dial gently, as though greeting an old friend. "So neat, so quiet, so efficient," he murmured. The thief knew exactly what he wanted, and how to take it. But in his neatness he has betrayed himself. He cannot resist arranging his little stage, the footprints, the window, the handkerchief. He wishes to prove too much. And in proving too much, he reveals, how do you say, his vanity. Hastings sighed. "I don't see it, Poirot." "Patience, mon ami. We are in the theatre. The curtain is only just rising. Soon, the actors will play their parts too boldly, and then, we shall know the author of this little drama." He turned, moustaches gleaming, eyes alight with quiet certainty. Yes. It begins to take shape. And when it is clear, I promise you, it will be formidable. Chapter 5: The Shadow of Debt. The atmosphere at Harrowfield Manor had grown heavy, though the weather remained bright. The sunshine pouring through the mullioned windows did little to dispel the gloom that had settled upon the house. Even the servants moved about in subdued fashion, as though conscious they were living in the midst of a drama. Suspicion, once vague, now coiled around every corner like smoke. Hercule Poirot, however, was in no way subdued. After luncheon he strolled into the library, humming a little tune, his patent shoes tapping softly on the carpet. Hastings, who had grown increasingly restless, followed. "Poirot," Hastings said, lowering his voice, "the whole thing is beginning to get dashed unpleasant. Everyone here suspects everyone else. If we're not careful, friendships will be ruined." Poirot smiled faintly, his eyes scanning the rows of leather-bound volumes. "ABN, Hastings, such is the nature of crime. It sows discord like the farmer sows seed. But unlike the farmer, crime grows weeds, not flowers." He plucked a book from the shelf, examined its cover, then replaced it. "And yet, mon ami, discord can be most revealing. When people are under strain, they show themselves as they are. The polite mask slips, and beneath, we glimpse the truth." Major Blaketon's troubles. Poirot's first discreet inquiries concerned Major Blaketon. In the smoking room he found the retired officer staring gloomily into his whiskey glass. "A fine house, Harrowfield," the Major muttered as Poirot approached. "A man could get used to this sort of life." "You do not find your own residence comfortable?" Poirot asked gently. The Major gave a short laugh. "Comfortable? My dear fellow, it's mortgaged to the hilt. I've had a string of rotten luck at cards, and my pension doesn't stretch as it used to. But don't think I'm complaining, soldiering never made a man rich. Still, it's dashed inconvenient." Poirot regarded him gravely. "An inconvenient debt sometimes demand desperate remedies, n'est-ce pas?" The Major's ruddy face grew darker. "Now look here, Poirot, if you mean to suggest I'd stoop to thieving." Poirot raised his hand. "I suggest nothing, Major. I merely observe, you have a need of money, and here is a necklace worth a fortune. That is fact, no more. But whether fact becomes guilt, that is another matter." The Major subsided, muttering, but Poirot had seen enough, the tremor in his hand, the nervous twitch of his moustache, the desperation poorly hidden. Mrs. Selby's investment. Later that afternoon Poirot paid a call upon Mrs. Selby, who reclined in the morning room surrounded by embroidery and the scent of lilac. "My dear Monsieur Poirot," she said with a flutter of hands, "I am quite exhausted by this dreadful business. Do tell me you are closer to finding the culprit." Poirot inclined his head. "Closer, yes, madam. But the truth, she plays hide-and-seek with us. Tell me, you have not lately had cause to consult your bankers?" Mrs. Selby's painted lips parted. "Why, what makes you ask such a thing?" Poirot smiled. "Because you are a woman of elegance, and elegance, it is costly. You live well, but I perceive a shadow, just so, upon your face when money is mentioned." Her laugh was brittle. "Well, if you must know, monsieur, I made a small investment which did not prosper. A shipping company in South America, most promising at first. Alas, the market can be cruel. But I have no need of stolen emeralds, I assure you." Poirot bowed. "Assurance is one thing, madam, proof is another. But I thank you for your candor." As he left, he whispered to Hastings, "You see, Hastings? Even the wealthy widow is not free from the shadow of loss. She, too, might be tempted." Mr. Kent's secret. The financial advisor, Harold Kent, proved the most evasive of all. Poirot found him in the library, poring over papers. "Working still, Monsieur Kent?" Poirot asked lightly. "Always something to do," Kent muttered, quickly sliding a sheet into his briefcase. Poirot's gaze lingered on the case. "You burned many papers last night, I think." Kent started. "Old accounts. Quite unnecessary to keep." "Unnecessary or dangerous?" Poirot said softly. Kent flushed. I hardly see what you mean." "But I think you do," Poirot replied gently. "The Winthrops' finances, they are in your hands. Perhaps not all is as it should be. Perhaps, if Sir Julian were to examine closely, he would find, how shall we say, irregularities." Kent's face worked. "It's not what you think. There were losses, yes, but investments can recover. If I had only a little more time." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Ah, time. Always it is time that betrays the dishonest man. But jewels, they do not wait. A necklace, it may be sold in a moment, and the losses covered. Is it not tempting, monsieur?" Kent muttered something inaudible and turned away. Poirot left him thus, but Hastings saw the triumph in his friend's eyes. Lady Winthrop's secret. That evening, Lady Winthrop herself came to Poirot, her face drawn with worry. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, "I must confide something. My husband does not know, and I beg you, keep it so. I borrowed against the emerald some months ago. The funds were necessary for repairs to the estate and for certain personal expenses. If Julian discovered—" Poirot raised his hand gently. "Do not distress yourself, madam. Your secret is safe with me. Yet you see, perhaps, how delicate is your position. If the jewels are gone, suspicion may fall where it should not. Therefore, it is more urgent than ever that I discover the truth." She nodded miserably, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Poirot reflects. Later, walking alone in the garden, Poirot considered all he had learned. The evening air was cool, the scent of roses heavy about him. So, he murmured to himself, the necklace was no mere ornament, but a mirror. In it we see reflected the troubles of all, debt, loss, dishonor, fear. Each one of them looks into the glass and sees temptation staring back. Major Blaketon, the gambler. Mrs. Selby, the careless investor. Kent, the adviser who advises too much. Even Lady Winthrop, forced into secrecy. Each one, a motive. He paused, adjusting his cuffs with meticulous care. But the thief, Hastings, the thief. He is clever, yes, but his cleverness betrays him. For he arranges too much, the footprints, the handkerchief, the stories too neat. Vanity, it is always the undoing. Hastings sighed. "And you know who it is?" Poirot smiled. "Not yet, mon ami. But the shadow of debt falls most heavily upon one man. Soon the debt will claim him, as surely as the necklace will return to its rightful place. Patience, Hastings. Patience." With that, Poirot turned back towards the house, his little figure upright and immaculate, his mind working as steadily as ever. Chapter 6. The trap is set. The following morning dawned with a deceptive serenity. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, gilding the breakfast table in a warm glow. Yet no one present at Harrowfield Manor seemed able to enjoy it. Sir Julian Winthrop pushed away his plate untouched, his eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. Lady Winthrop sat with a cup of tea that had long grown cold. Major Blaketon's laugh was too hearty, too forced, and Mrs. Selby prattled with brittle brightness. Poirot, however, buttered his toast with exquisite care, as though not the slightest cloud marred the day. Hastings, watching him, felt a surge of irritation. Really, Poirot, he said in an undertone, you behave as though nothing has happened. Don't you see how wretched they all are? You could cut the tension with a knife. Poirot dabbed his lips delicately with a napkin. It is when the air is most charged, mon ami, that one must remain calm. The storm, it is near. But before it breaks, I must place all my little pieces upon the board. Hastings stared. What pieces? Poirot only smiled. A private conversation. After breakfast, Poirot requested the presence of Sir Julian and Lady Winthrop in the library. Hastings attended as well, eager to hear what new revelation his friend would unfold. Sir Julian, Madam, Poirot began gravely, I have the honour to request your complete confidence. I believe I can bring the matter of the emerald necklace to a conclusion, but it will require a little theatre, a little artifice. Lady Winthrop leaned forward, her face pale. Theatre. Precisely, Poirot said. The thief, you see, is an artist. He arranges his scenes, he lays his false trails. Very well, Poirot also will arrange a scene. Tonight, I beg you, summon all the household. I will make an announcement, and then we shall see who betrays himself. Sir Julian looked sceptical. Do you mean to frighten them into a confession? Poirot shook his head. Non. The guilty one will not confess. But he will reveal himself, if the stage is set with care. The Winthrops exchanged anxious glances, but at last Sir Julian said, Very well, Monsieur Poirot. We trust you. Do as you think best. The Whispering House. All that day, whispers ran through the manor. Servants murmured in corners, guests looked over their shoulders uneasily. Poirot's intention to make some dramatic revelation that evening had spread quickly, though no one knew the details. Hastings, too, was kept in suspense. Confound it, Poirot, you could at least tell me what you're planning. My dear Hastings, Poirot replied serenely, your face, it is like glass. Transparent. If you know too much, you will betray it with a glance. No, you shall learn at the same moment as the others. Hastings sighed in exasperation, but he recognized the familiar glint in Poirot's eyes. His friend was moving steadily towards the climax. Setting the stage. That afternoon Poirot busied himself with curious preparations. He spent half an hour with the butler, Graves, giving quiet instructions. He examined the safe once more, polishing the dial with his handkerchief until it gleamed. He requested that all the curtains in the drawing room be drawn at precisely 9 o'clock. Details, Hastings, he murmured. Always the details. It is by them we catch the criminal. As evening fell, the household gathered nervously. The drawing room had been transformed, lamps glowed softly, curtains shut out the night, and in the center of the room, placed prominently on a small table, lay a velvet case. Good heavens, Hastings whispered, staring at it. Poirot, that looks like the necklace. Shush, Poirot hushed, finger to his lips. Appearances, mon ami. Appearances. Poirot's announcement. At 9 o'clock precisely, Poirot entered the room. His small figure seemed to command it entirely, his immaculate attire, his carefully waxed moustaches, his air of quiet authority, all drew the eyes of those present. My friends, he began, his voice clear and measured, you are gathered here because a theft has brought misery to this house. The emerald necklace of Lady Winthrop, of great beauty and great value, was stolen. But I have news for you, the necklace has been recovered. A murmur swept through the room. Lady Winthrop gave a cry of astonishment. Major Blaketon leaned forward eagerly. Mrs. Selby clasped her hands. Poirot raised a finger. Recovered, but not yet restored. For the thief still walks among us. And it is my intention tonight to reveal him. The silence that followed was profound. The trap tightens. Poirot turned to Graves. "Bring forward the case, if you please." The butler placed the velvet box upon the table. Poirot opened it with a flourish. Inside lay a glittering necklace, emeralds flashing green fire beneath the lamplight. Hastings gasped. "But that is the necklace." Poirot smiled faintly. "So it seems. In truth, it is a replica made this afternoon with the assistance of a jeweller in town. The thief will not know it is false. He will see only temptation return to the scene of the crime." He allowed the words to sink in, then stepped back. "And now, we wait. For the guilty one cannot resist. He will betray himself, if not by word, then by glance, by gesture. Vanity, always vanity, it is the chink in the armour." A nervous assembly. The atmosphere grew taut as a wire. The guests shifted uneasily, eyes darting towards the glittering jewels. Major Blaketon wiped his brow. Mrs. Selby fingered her pearls nervously. Alice Harrowfield stared fixedly at the carpet. Kent's hands twisted together in his lap. Poirot, outwardly serene, missed nothing. His little eyes roved from face to face, noting every flicker, every breath too quickly drawn. "Remarkable, is it not," he said softly, "how a necklace can command such power? It tempts, it dazzles, it overwhelms. Each of you, perhaps, has felt its pull. But one among you has felt more than temptation, he has acted." A stir. Someone, Hastings could not tell who, gave a muffled exclamation. The moment of crisis. Just then, the lamps flickered. The room plunged momentarily into darkness. A gasp rose from the assembled company. When the lights returned, all eyes flew at once to the little table. The velvet box was empty. Lady Winthrop screamed. Sir Julian sprang to his feet. "By heaven, stolen again!" But Poirot's voice rang out, calm and triumphant. "Ah, precisely as I hoped." He turned slowly, his finger extended. "There stands the thief." All heads turned in unison. The accused froze, caught in the act, emeralds glinting in his hand. Poirot's trap has sprung, but the identity of the thief, and the full reasoning behind Poirot's revelation, remain for Chapter 7. Chapter 7, The Accusation. For a heartbeat the room was frozen in silence. The emeralds glittered like cold fire in the light, clutched in the hand of Harold Kent, the Winthrop's financial advisor. His face had drained of colour, his mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping at the surface. "My God!" Sir Julian exclaimed hoarsely. "Kent!" Lady Winthrop gave a low moan, covering her face with trembling hands. Kent at last found his voice. This is monstrous." "A trick!" "I swear to you, I was merely examining the necklace." "Examining?" Major Blaketon's voice was heavy with scorn. "Stuff and nonsense. You snatched at it like a starving man at bread." Mrs. Selby added in her sharp tones, "And to think I trusted you with my investments once. Oh, what a relief I withdrew them in time." Kent's eyes darted wildly from face to face. "It isn't true, I wasn't going to keep it." "I meant only," his voice trailed away under the weight of their stares. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the hubbub. "Mesdames et messieurs, let us not leap to conclusions. Yes, Monsieur Kent has revealed himself most dramatically. But let us hear him fully before judgment is passed." Kent's plea. Kent sank into a chair, the necklace still trembling in his grasp. "It's all lies, deliberate lies. That box was placed there to tempt me." He pointed a shaking finger at Poirot. "He arranged it, he wanted me to be seen." Poirot inclined his head. "Mais oui, monsieur, I arranged it." That I do not deny. The box, the jewels, the gathering, it was all theatre. But theatre, Monsieur Kent, can only reveal what is already true. The honest man does not seize what is not his, even in darkness. Kent flashed scarlet. I was only proving it was false. I suspected you, Poirot. I wanted to show you up. I thought if I examined it. Lady Winthrop interrupted sharply. You had no right to touch it at all. Kent covered his face with his hands. I was desperate, he muttered. Desperate. The web tightens. Poirot's gaze was steady. Desperate, yes. You have been concealing great losses, have you not? Money entrusted to you, lost. You burned papers to hide it. You promised yourself you would make good before discovery, but instead the hole grew deeper. Kent's shoulders sagged. I only needed time. Time, Poirot repeated softly. But time betrayed you. And so you thought of the emeralds. With them, you could replace what you had lost, conceal your ruin. The temptation was too strong, n'est-ce pas? Kent gave a strangled cry. No. I never touched them before tonight. I swear it. Sir Julian's voice was harsh. You expect us to believe that, when you've just been caught red-handed? Doubt in the air. Yet even as anger surged, Poirot held up a calming hand. Patience, my friends. Remember what I said, appearances deceive. Monsieur Kent has indeed betrayed himself, but not, perhaps, in the way you imagine. A hush fell. Hastings leaned forward eagerly, though Poirot's tone warned him not to hope for too much yet. Poirot turned back to Kent. Monsieur, when I set my little snare, I watched not only your actions but those of every soul in this room. And you, alas, could not resist. That is your weakness. But weakness is not always the same as guilt. Kent's head jerked up. You mean you believe me? I mean, Poirot said gravely, that I have not yet pronounced judgment. That moment will come, but not tonight. Tonight, I have merely demonstrated who could not resist temptation when it was placed before him. The true thief, however, is of a different breed, cleverer, colder, more calculating. He does not act on impulse. He plans. The guests react. The room erupted into voices. Major Blaketon thundered, so you're saying Kent isn't the thief after all? Then why the devil accuse him? Mrs. Selby sniffed. It's all very confusing. If he isn't guilty, he is certainly guilty of something. Alice Harrowfield, who had been silent till now, spoke in a trembling voice. Must we endure more of this torture? I cannot bear it. Sir Julian slammed his fist on the table. Poirot, this is intolerable. If you know the truth, speak it. Poirot spread his hands with calm dignity. But I do not yet reveal the truth. I merely draw aside one curtain. The final revelation, it must wait. There are details still to arrange. His eyes twinkled briefly. And you know, Miss Amos, Poirot never reveals his hand too soon. A private word with Hastings. Later, when the assembly had dispersed in a storm of muttering and indignation, Hastings cornered Poirot in the corridor. Really, Poirot, you're playing a dangerous game. Poor Kent is half ruined by the suspicion, and yet you say he may not be the true thief. What on earth are you about? Poirot laid a finger alongside his nose. Hastings, you see only the surface. It is true Kent betrayed himself tonight, but not by stealing the necklace. None. He betrayed the condition of his soul, his weakness, his debt, his fear. Those are valuable truths, but they are not the whole. The real culprit hides yet, but the circle, it grows tighter. Hastings groaned. You'll drive me mad with your circles. Poirot chuckled. Then be patient one more day, mon ami. Tomorrow, the circle will close. The household in turmoil. The night that followed was restless. Servants reported that Mrs. Selby paced her chamber until dawn. Major Blaketon locked himself in his room with a bottle. Alice Harrowfield wept quietly behind closed doors. Even Sir Julian prowled the corridors, a dark figure of anger and humiliation. Only Poirot seemed at peace. He rose at his usual hour, arranged his moustaches with care, and breakfasted heartily. To Hastings' exasperation, he even suggested a stroll in the garden to admire the roses. "Confound it, Poirot," Hastings burst out, "you talk of roses when half the house believes Kent a thief and the other half suspects each other." Poirot smiled serenely. "ABN, Hastings, that is exactly as I wish it. For suspicion is like the nettle, it stings, it burns. And in their discomfort, the guilty one will betray himself." He adjusted his cuffs with meticulous precision. "Tonight, Hastings. Tonight all will be clear. The thief will stand revealed, and the necklace, it will be returned." Hastings threw up his hands. "Then I suppose I must wait." "Patience, mon ami," Poirot murmured. "It is the last step that brings us to the summit. And what a view it will be." Thus the stage was set for the grand denouement. The household, weary with suspicion and fear, awaited Poirot's final revelation. Only he, serene and unhurried, knew the truth, and in Chapter 8, he would unveil it with all his customary brilliance. Chapter 8, The Truth Revealed. The following evening, as twilight deepened beyond the tall windows, the household of Harrowfield Manor assembled once more in the drawing room. Tension crackled like static in the air. Sir Julian stood grim and silent by the fireplace. Lady Winthrop sat rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Major Blaketon paced, muttering under his breath. Mrs. Selby perched on the edge of a chair, her pearls trembling at her throat. Alice Harrowfield twisted a handkerchief between her fingers. Kent, pale and haggard, stared at the carpet, the memory of the previous night's humiliation still heavy upon him. Into this uneasy gathering stepped Hercule Poirot, immaculate as ever, his little frame radiating quiet authority. Hastings followed, notebook in hand, his eyes alight with anticipation. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, bowing slightly, "thank you for indulging me one final time. Tonight, we end this little drama. The curtain shall fall, and the truth, she will stand revealed." Poirot's method. He moved to the center of the room, his moustaches gleaming, his hands lightly clasped. "Consider, if you please, the facts. A necklace of great value disappears from the safe. There are no signs of forced entry, save for a broken window and footprints leading to the river. And then, certain objects, most curious, appear to incriminate particular individuals, a handkerchief embroidered with an A, footprints so clear they might have been printed, alibis that crumble at a touch. Do you not see? The thief has staged his play too neatly. He has sought to lead us astray with too many clues. He spread his hands. And when there are too many clues, my friends, they are not clues at all. They are decorations, props, arranged with vanity. Vanity, I tell you, is the hallmark of this crime. The suspects unmasked. Poirot turned towards Major Blaketon. "You, Major, are ruined by debt. The gambling tables have stripped you bare. You had every reason to seize the necklace and turn it into coin. Yet you did not. Your bluster is real, but it is the bluster of a man too reckless, too careless, to devise such a careful masquerade." The Major gave a short bark of laughter. "Damn right I couldn't have managed it." Poirot inclined his head, then looked to Mrs. Selby. "You, madam, with your unfortunate shipping investment, you too might long for sudden fortune. But again, no. Your vanity lies in society, in appearance, in talk. You are not one to creep about in silence and leave false trails. Mrs. Selby sniffed indignantly but made no reply. Poirot turned next to Kent. The adviser shrank beneath his gaze. Monsieur Kent, you are desperate indeed. You burnt papers, you concealed your ruin. You grasped at the necklace when I set my little snare. That is your weakness. But your weakness is impulsive. The theft, on the other hand, was planned with care, with coldness. It was not the act of a man who trembles and sweats. No, monsieur, you are guilty of dishonesty, but not of theft. Others may punish you for your accounts, but not I. Kent looked up, hope flickering in his eyes, then fell back into silence, still crushed but no longer the center of the storm. The handkerchief and the footprints. Poirot lifted his hand, finger wagging gently. The handkerchief with the letter A, was it not too convenient? It accused poor Mademoiselle Alice most unfairly. And the footprints to the river, so obliging, so perfectly clear. None. They were not the marks of a desperate thief fleeing with speed, but the careful impressions of a man with time, laying his stage. These are falsehoods, my friends, falsehoods planted by a mind too clever, too vain. Alice Harrowfield gave a sob of relief, though her eyes remained wary. The true clue. Poirot's voice dropped, soft but compelling. And yet, amid the false clues, one small detail rang true. The safe itself. When I examined it, I noted how perfectly it had been closed. Not forced, not tampered. No, it was opened by someone who knew the combination. Sir Julian's head jerked up. But only Lady Winthrop and I know it. Just so, Poirot said quietly. And when a safe is opened with knowledge, not with force, the circle of suspicion grows very small indeed. The revelation. The silence was absolute. Poirot let it linger, then turned, very slowly, towards Lady Winthrop. Madam, he said gently, it was you. A collective gasp rose from the room. Lady Winthrop went deathly pale. No. You cannot mean. Poirot's eyes softened. But I do. You confessed to me, privately, that you borrowed against the emeralds. The truth, however, goes further. Your creditors pressed harder than you admitted. You feared ruin, disgrace. So you removed the necklace yourself, intending to sell it quietly. And then, to protect yourself, you arranged the scene, the footprints, the handkerchief dropped among the roses, the window forced from within. You meant suspicion to scatter among your guests, to buy yourself time. It was clever, madam, too clever. Sir Julian staggered back as though struck. Mary, is this true? Lady Winthrop's hands clutched her chair. Her lips trembled. At last she whispered, yes. The motive laid bare. Her voice, low but steady, filled the silence. I had no choice, Julian. You would never have forgiven me if you knew how I had borrowed. The estate is costly, the repairs endless. I thought if I could sell the necklace abroad, in secret, I might repay the loans before anyone knew. I never meant to keep it. Only, to save us. Tears slid down her cheeks. Poirot bowed his head. I do not excuse, madam. Theft is theft, even when born of fear. Yet I understand. You are no hardened criminal. You are a woman driven by desperation, who sought to conceal her shame. Poirot's triumph. He turned to the others, his voice firm once more. Thus, you see, each of you had motive, each of you concealed secrets. But only Lady Winthrop had the means, the knowledge of the safe. The false trails, the stagecraft, they were but the efforts of a mind striving to deflect suspicion. Vanity, as I told you, was the key. For in her desire to appear innocent, Lady Winthrop revealed herself most plainly. He drew himself up, moustaches quivering with satisfaction. Voila! The mystery is solved. The aftermath. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Sir Julian, his face hard, said, "Mary, why did you not come to me?" She wept openly now. "I was afraid. Afraid of your anger, your disappointment." Major Blaketon coughed awkwardly, Mrs. Selby looked away, and Alice sobbed quietly. Only Poirot remained serene, his gaze distant, as though he had seen such tragedies many times before. At last, Sir Julian said heavily, "The necklace will be returned. As for the rest, we shall settle it privately. But know this, Poirot, you have saved us from disgrace." "I thank you." Poirot inclined his head with quiet dignity. "It is enough that the truth is known. The truth, always, is the friend of justice." Later, as they departed, Hastings murmured, "Poirot, I should never have suspected Lady Winthrop." "You amaze me." Poirot smiled, twirling his moustaches. "But naturally, mon ami. It is the psychology of the situation. Always ask, who has the opportunity? Who benefits? And above all, who arranges too much to appear innocent? There, you will find your culprit." He paused, gazing into the night where the manor loomed, solemn and silent once more. "Yes, Hastings. It is always the vanity that betrays."